Alrighty, well, I'll go ahead and begin my spiel while we may have a few more people trickle in. So thank you for joining us for today's Illinois Apex Accelerator at Champaign County EDC webinar. Before I hand it over to Kelly, just a few quick things. I do want to thank you all for joining your Friday morning with us. If you have any questions about today's session, please feel free to enter those in the chat. You can access that in the toolbar of your Zoom, and we will get those addressed before we close out today's session. You will also receive a follow-up email later this afternoon, and that will include both a link to today's recording along with a PDF version of Kelly's PowerPoint so that if you'd like to go back and revisit any of the information, if there's any live links shared throughout it, you will have access to do all of that as well. And once again, that will go out later this afternoon, so please be on the lookout for that. I'm also going to include in that follow-up email some additional links to services we provide, how you can become a client at no cost to you and receive confidential advising one-on-one with Kelly, and also the link to our events calendar. So if you'd like to join us for any additional upcoming sessions, you can do so as well. So I'll go ahead and hand it off to Kelly and we can get started.
Great. Thank you, Jordan. And again, I'd like to add my welcome to everyone who joined us this morning for I'm interested in this solicitation. Now what? Looking at deconstructing the federal RFQs and RFPs. In this session, we're going to be specifically discussing proposal preparation. I'm Keli Krueger-Huhra, and I'm the Center Director here at the Champaign County EDC for our Illinois Apex Accelerator. And I just want to briefly introduce those of you that I've not had the opportunity to talk with previously, that what the Illinois Apex Accelerator does. We are part of a national network. You see there on the map how extensively we cover the U.S. and the territories. And so we have over 600 networks across the United States of those contracting experts that we can draw on for expertise and knowledge to help us in our quest for government contracting. We fall under the management of the Department of Defense, the Office of Small Business Programs, and working with the Champaign County EDC, Illinois Department of Commerce, and our partners at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and also the University of Illinois system. We're here to provide no-fee services to help businesses that want to work in the space of government contracting to be capable to do that, to pursue and perform under those contracts, either with the Department of Defense, federal agencies, state and local governments as well, and prime contractors. We want to provide critical education and training to enable you to do that. We understand, as the government does, that new suppliers, non-traditional suppliers to the government, whether it be local, state, or federal, results in a stronger industrial base, in greater competition, and higher quality goods at a lower cost for the taxpayer. This is just a snapshot of the services that we provide as Illinois Apex Accelerators, again, in helping you compete for and win government contracts, performing on those as well. You know, everything from the start of conducting market research to finding government opportunities and establishing relationships, the SAM registrations, the locating businesses to partner with potentially, and we'll talk a little bit about that today, and locating technical information, pricing data, the discussion on putting together the bids and proposals, and then certifications, which can be a tool in your toolbox for working in the government space. And so on the right-hand side, you see some metrics. You see some of the accomplishments for the Illinois, specifically Apex Accelerators, in the number of businesses we serve. And those that have attended our statewide events, more than 4,500 businesses in that case, and the number of counseling sessions that we've been able to host one-on-one with our clients, in addition to the training that we do in the seminars and webinars like you're attending today. And so our efforts to assist clients have created more than 184 jobs and saved 446 jobs. And in case we have reached you outside of the Central Illinois area, this is a listing of our other Apex Accelerators throughout the state. There are 11 of those, and you can find one that may be located closer to you in looking at this complete guide. Okay. And I just want to encourage you, again, we do have 2 to 3 training events every month to educate and to encourage participation in the government contracting space. Our next webinar will be on April 11th, and that is beginning our series. It is a 4-part series in government contracting, conducting market research that is virtual. And of course, that is where it all gets started. So if you are new to the marketplace, that would be a good one for you to attend. Later in the month of April, on the 22nd, we're going to put together a mentor protege program. Got a lot of inquiries on what's the potential for joining a mentor protege. And so we're going to talk more about what is available there. Please follow us on LinkedIn, where you'll see announcements, trainings, and the activities that are going on in the Apex Accelerator. The other thing I have highlighted here on the right side is our new launch of a Procurement Readiness Academy. This is an opportunity with a training partner we have, referred to as Govology. Govology, we have professional development sessions we do through Govology. They're now putting together a 10-week cohort, an intense 4 to 5 hours a week for a business that really wants to immerse themselves in government contracting. This is an opportunity. Working through the Apex Accelerator will get you a discounted registration fee. So by all means, if you think that's something you might want to look at a little bit further, please let me know. You'll have my contact information at the end of the webinar. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm just going to recap from what we did in the first session. So in our first session, and it is recorded on YouTube. So if by chance you came into this session specifically, but you didn't get the first part, which was really understanding the different sections of the proposal, the RFP, RFQ. You're welcome to go and view that. This is going to be taking our understanding of the sections, which you see here, of the RFP, RFQ, and how do we actually then respond to that if we're interested in presenting a bid or a proposal. So this recap just shows you that there are all of these sections, whether they're specifically called out, but these are all there, mandated, really statutory through the through the Federal Acquisition Regulations. And we'll have one of those specifically to look at as we go through this. But this really breaks down everything you're going to see, whether labeled specifically as Section A. Section A is your solicitation. And why is it important to understand that? That is the basis of the requirements to be capable and be responsive in filling out the information for an RFP or RFQ. So we're going to really break that elephant down into some critical chunks. So I've called this a quick read here. We're going to look at specifically at Section A, because that's your solicitation, your contract form. Standard forms are located in there. Again, referring back to our first section where we went through those, you can find that on the video. Section C, which is your statement of work, again, very important to understand what you're committing to, and we'll talk about that. Specifically, Section L, which has your instructions, the conditions, the notices, really what makes you responsive or not to what you're submitting. Section M, which are, again, critical, your evaluation factors. That is understanding how are you going to be scored, and we're going to talk about reading versus scoring on your submission. Okay, so very basically, we looked at Section A, which are your standard forms. Again, there are multiple versions of that, but let's look at one you're going to see often, which is a standard form 1449. Very basic information that you can look at quickly just to know, do I need to go any further? Is my company eligible? You may or may not be familiar, but you will be. The set-aside market. If you have a certification, just being small is the set-aside market. Breaking that down then into the categories, the social economic certifications, need to understand if this solicitation is restricted in any way, either just to a small business or a further category of a hub zone or woman-owned, etc., then you need to know that right up front to know if you're even capable of bidding. Are you eligible to participate on this solicitation? Number one. Number two, if you look at the highlighted area, the box referred to as number 8, what's the solicitation deadline? We'll talk a little bit about the requirements for how long you should have to put this together. But in many cases, it's a short turnaround. If you're busy right now, if you don't have the time to dedicate to it, if you know up front that that's the deadline, that will again help you decide quickly. If you can meet that response date, great, you can go further. If you can't, then you know this isn't the right time for you to pursue on this particular solicitation. Okay. So again, getting into the granular part of this, which is the proposal preparation. I can't tell you how important it is to read the RFP document. Read it and reread it. You're going to see several attachments. You're going to have to look at every single one of those at least once. Reread on all of them as well. Don't assume anything and understand everything. So you need to understand, do you need additional information? Okay. Generally speaking, you will see in that proposal, the documents that you just read through, is there a time to submit questions? The agencies must stay very transparent. That's why it's a quiet period, and they're not going to take your questions verbally because they can't be seen giving any information to someone that they didn't give to everyone. So that's why you'll be able to submit questions, generally speaking, in writing. And an addendum will come out, which will answer everyone's questions in writing for everyone to see. So something to think about when you submit a question, not to disclose anything that may be somewhat of a unique opportunity for you, because it will be known by everyone that is potentially submitting a bid or a proposal. You're going to order any specs or standards that you need right away. Give yourself the maximum amount of time to review those. And again, another opportunity besides submitting questions in writing is a site visit or a pre-proposal conference, a bid conference. Always take advantage of that. In fact, sometimes it's mandatory that and again, looking at that those due dates, if by chance you have missed that and it was mandatory, it's going to be very difficult for you, if at all possible, for you to submit a bid or a proposal. So a site visit, getting firsthand face-to-face with those folks, or it may be virtual. And since COVID, much has gone virtual. That is an excellent opportunity. And again, maybe a mandatory opportunity to learn more and have some issues addressed. Okay. So again, don't be afraid to ask questions if those documents aren't clear. If you want more details, it doesn't impact you and your chances at, winning the award. The agencies encourage you. They want you to ask questions and get additional detail and clarify things. You may find on one page that they're asking you for a quantity of 24. On another page, they're asking for a quantity of 30 on another document. Clarify that. Don't assume one or the other. And know, again, when the due date is for you to make those inquiries, okay, to make sure you are able to get your questions answered. And if you didn't get a chance to ask your question, go ahead and read that addendum. And you're going to have to acknowledge that you did read that amendment, because that amendment is going to have those clarifications that maybe you didn't think to ask, but it's going to be very important for you to know. So take advantage of those that did ask the questions, and you'll have to acknowledge that that Q&A, whatever came out of that, any modifications that were made because of the question and answer period, you're going to have to incorporate into your proposal or bid. Okay. The Freedom of Information Act gives us the ability then to ask for procurement history. Now, we don't have to reference, hey, we're going to hold you to the FOIA, but just for your information, when you're requesting that procurement history, asking for the name of the current contractor. Is there an incumbent? Can you ask for the contract amount? will you get it? You can ask. It doesn't hurt to ask. But what you're going to get, if you even get it in time to respond to the bid, is going to be heavily redacted. The agencies still want to maintain a certain level of competitiveness. So they're not actually going to disclose to you in detail what they're willing to pay and show their cards in that. Copies of contracts, abstracts of bids. You can use the information in Block 10, where it gives you the contracting officer and their contact information. That's where you're going to go to ask for the information. And there are other sites out there that have contract history, not necessarily to the level of detail that would be as helpful as actually getting the contract documents. But there are other sources we can go to get additional information on past awards. Okay, so let's talk about Section C, which is one we highlighted. That's the statement of work. Okay, what is the agency going to need? And just in a recap, you have the statement of work that establishes all non-specification requirements for the contractor's efforts. Okay, they're going to tell you directly or with the use of specified cited documents what you need to accomplish with your bid. What is your performance expectation? Performance work statement. Now that's a statement of work for performance. So that's going to describe the results, okay, in a clear, specific, objective terms with measurable outcomes. And then you have statement of objectives, which is a government document that is put into the solicitation, which says this is what your performance objectives are. And it's used in solicitations when the government intends to have maximum flexibility by the vendor, by the offerer, so that you can propose innovative approaches. So they're not going to tell you how to achieve this. You're going to tell them how you're going to achieve it based on what they want the outcome to be. Okay, so understanding what you're seeing there, okay, in there you'll also find a list of roles required on the project, any details on labor conditions, work week, are security clearances required? So again, in looking at your capability to perform on this, if you don't have security clearances, that's gonna restrict you if it's required. Okay, so again, making sure you can perform all the work. And if you can't, do you have other vendors that you can team with? Others that do what you do that can increase your capacity in adding to your functions. And the two of you together, the three of you together can accomplish this where one alone could not. So in a teaming share of the workload, that may enable you to be able to respond to this bid or quote. So be thinking about at this point when you're really looking at that statement of work, why should you be awarded that contract? Where is your superpower that says, I am all in for this. This is right up my alley. This is what we do in our organization. And as you're thinking about that theme, that way of thinking should flow through your proposal, because we're going to talk about how you're going to be presenting your strengths and how you compare from a metric standpoint to your competition. So this is where you really start building what you're selling to meet the objectives in that proposal. And then, how are you going to fulfill the contract? Do you need more labor? Do you need more supplies? Do you need equipment? So you're going to be explaining to them, if that is the case, how are you going to present your proposal as the best value to that agency? So again, in determining your potential, is this opportunity consistent? Is this something you've been doing along? You have past performance, you can show this is not only part of your business plan, but something that you can show a history that you've done this type of work successfully. Do you have capacity, equipment, personnel, sufficient experience? Can you beat the competition? At this point, you're looking at what are our strengths as a business, what are our competitors' strengths, and how do we offset that? How do we highlight our strengths and offset any weaknesses we might have or anything that we are less capable of than our competitors? And of course, can you make money? Okay. And that's what we call a go, no go decision. If we answer all the questions appropriately, we're going to move forward. If not, we're going to have an honest assessment and say, you know what, this might not be the one for us. So now we're going to talk about section L. Again, mission critical because section L is the instructions. This is going to tell you what you need to present and how the format is that you're going to present that information in. The General Accounting Office, which is the GAO, they strictly enforce the restrictions that on page limits, font size, and yes, it does get down to that level of detail. How big they want the font, the date and time of submission, very important. And how do they want it delivered to them? Back in the day, they would ask for paper documents to be delivered. Not so much anymore, but you will still see that. And think very carefully if after you've read through the statement of work or scope, whatever that they have presented to you, if you're thinking, well, I could kind of do that, but I'd really like to do it this way, other than the statement of objectives where you are, free to propose an innovative approach, some solicitations are going to say, we want it exactly the way we want it. And that is explicitly in the proposal, and that they're not taking any exceptions. So if that's the case, you could become non-responsive if you want to propose or think you need to propose in order to meet the requirements, something other than specifically what they're asking you for. And then, make sure that if you are submitting anything that is, proprietary or anything you would not want released outside of the evaluation of your proposal, then state that. Put that in the legend. Number 3 here says, restrictive, prohibiting the agency's use of material in the proposal for reasons other than evaluation. In other words, don't let it outside of your office to where our competitors might be able to see it. Okay, so again, what is really important in that section L is that in there, they're going to give you the conformance requirements. Okay, you want to make sure as you go through the specific instructions, how is it required to be formatted, looking for words that are going to mandate to you what is imperative in your response. So those words are highlighted here. Shall, will, must, require, mandatory, due, date. Those words will indicate an obligation. Okay, so those are non-negotiables. A shall, a will, a must. They're statutory requirements. Okay, and when you find those words, they're going to have the same meaning. They're going to mean you are obligated to do this. So how do you capture all of that? How do you make sure that if it says you will do it or you must do it, that you have that included in your proposal? And the way we suggest that you do that when you go through reading multiple times, highlighting all of those words is take them out of the proposal and build what we call a compliance matrix. Now that compliance matrix then will ensure that those requirements are addressed in the proposal. And if you want further reference to that, you see the FAR 52212-1, which states instructions to offerors, commercial products and commercial services. The things that you're going to see in the information in the proposal are going to come out of those instructions that the contracting officers must follow for inclusion in the documents themselves. For you making an offer, you refer to that FAR clause, and you can use that as what we would say as a template to go through and make sure that all of those areas that are mandatory are addressed. And just as an example, a compliance matrix can be something as simple as that. Okay, the proposal and the date. This could be an Excel spreadsheet. Where did you find that shall? What is the requirement? Was it in section M, which we're going to look at, or was it in section L, the instructions? What are the comments? And you can basically use this then in your review of your proposal as checking off requirement. It needs to be in 10-point font. Okay, I found that in section L. I confirm I used 10-point font. I went all the way through the proposal and I formatted it so it is a 10-point font. I can't exceed 10 pages. I have not exceeded 10 pages. So that is part of my requirement. And I am confirming then in my proposal that I did just that I met those requirements. Okay. The other part that you're going to find is the terms and conditions. Again, I referred to the Federal Acquisition Regulation, which is known as the FAR. Those terms and conditions that you would find in a requirement in a RFP or an RFQ come from the Federal Acquisition Regulations. You can't take any shortcuts and research anything you're not sure of. If it refers to a FAR clause and you're not familiar with that FAR clause, Google search it. Go on and look to see. They expect you to understand all the terms and conditions, and you are signing up. If you respond to that RFQ, RFP, you are signing up for those terms and conditions. So very important. Again, just to reinforce the compliance priorities, when you're looking at the requirements for the first time, a government opportunity you're not so familiar with, keep in mind that there are going to be, say you do win post-award, if the response is a cost plus, they're going to be looking for your cost accounting standards. Now, if it's a fixed price, it's a fixed price. The risk is on you that you've not calculated costs correctly. But if it's cost plus, that's going to come back to you to make sure that, agencies like the Defense Contract Audit Agency, the DCAA, or the DCMA, the Contract Management Agency, they may be conducting an audit throughout the stages of that contract. So that's another reason why it's very important that you understand the pre-award stage. So as you're submitting, once the contract is won, what kind of compliance you're going to be obligated to. So just keep that in mind. Okay, now we're going to talk about Section M. Section M is critically important because this helps you understand how is my proposal going to be evaluated. Okay, what in my proposal may have some additional weight versus other parts of my proposal. Okay, so what's important about Section M is it guides you. It helps you understand in that limited amount of time that you have to respond, if you have to, and you will prioritize. What do you work on? What do you spend the majority of your time on? What do you work on first and foremost? Because it's weighted heavier than other aspects of your proposal. Everything is important, but when you go to find out, hey, I've got limited on time, I really need to understand, in this example here, what is most important in the weight of this proposal. Now, usually they'll be on a 100-point scale if you get that. And so if I know that the evaluator is going to look at my proposal and they're going to look at the technical approach versus cost versus past performance and sustainability is 60%, 60 points on that 100-point scale. So where am I going to really emphasize and spend a lot of time? It's going to be on the technical approach. And that's broken out into 10 management, 10 partnerships, and 40 project description. So again, now I'm going to be laser focused on the project description part of the technical approach. In a real, in an ideal situation, you've got the, maximum amount of time to spend on each aspect. But in the real world, focusing on the evaluation criteria in the order of importance will allow you to prioritize. And there you see cost is 15 of 100 points. So this tells you to this agency, USAID, that while everything is important, the most important is the technical approach and then the cost. So likely they're going to evaluate, they're going to have, two sections of your proposal. It's going to be your technical approach. How are you going to resolve it? How are you going to solve their pain point? And then what's it going to cost you to do that? They likely will not even evaluate your cost until they look at your technical approach. So your technical approach being 60 points, that's going to be the factor that's going to be the separation of, we're going to evaluate these for technical. This small group then is technically acceptable. Now we're going to look at the cost. So the first thing they're going to look at is your technical approach, which again is why in this case, that would be the most important. And then they'll evaluate your cost if they find you to be capable to perform. Okay, so again, understanding that these are the grounds you'll be selected or not selected if you don't meet the expectations on the evaluation criteria. Think about your proposal, the preparation of that as though you were the buyer. Okay, what would you look for in a vendor? Look at the selection criteria, again, the evaluation, and post that somewhere where you can see it and refer back to that. Keeping that in mind as you're putting together all those different sections of your proposal, the response that you're making should fall in line with that selection criteria. What is important to them, and how are you incorporating that, referring to that in your proposal? And so that you've got that scorecard, you see the 60, 15, 10, 10. So you should be building your proposal based on, again, the priorities and the importance of what's in that evaluation criteria. Okay, so how do you make your proposal easy to evaluate? Okay, you have that proposal evaluation worksheet, and it's really a crosswalk because there'll be sections in that RFP or RFQ. And so you will refer to those sections in your proposal. So if you're addressing, paragraph 2 in your proposal, then when you say this is in response to paragraph 2, you have made that crosswalk. You've told that person that's reading it, hey, this is my answer to your requirement in paragraph 2. Okay, and so your section headers will correspond and use the wording that they put in that proposal. So we'll see an example of what they call something and how we put that in basically your table of contents and how you refer to that the same way that they do. So we're going to talk about how we make this scoring with our strengths in the evaluation worksheet, and then looking at it again from the eyes of the person that'll be reviewing it. So as an example, say if we look at 1.5 transition plan, okay, they call the transition plan, we might call that something else, but we're going to call it a transition plan because that's the wording that they use. So the RFP wants you to address the transition plan. So we're going to say 1.5 in our proposal is their transition plan. And then you see in parentheses, we're going to say, where did we find that in the RFP? Well, we found it in section C.3. We found it in section L, which is our instructions. And we found it in the evaluation criteria, section M, in number 5. So again, we're making this all really direct and straightforward for that evaluator to figure out, we asked for this, here's where they told us about it. Okay, because they're asking you to tell them how you can meet their expectations. So if they want to see how you're going to meet that particular expectation, this is where they're going to go. This is where you found it. This is where you're addressing it. Okay, so you're organizing those headings based on the RFP instructions. And again, as you see in 1.2, it says restate those keywords that come right out of the RFP. Again, we're making it super easy for them to cross-reference and evaluate what they're looking for and what your proposal contains. Okay. So what makes a great proposal? They're scoring it. They're not reading it. I mean, think about multiple proposals coming across the desk of an evaluator. They're going to be looking for features. They're going to look for the strength in your proposal, your strengths, and how they come across in your proposal. And what's the strength? It's really a feature of the offer that exceeds expectations. Okay, they're going to tell you they want a contract requirement, but how are you going to exceed that, and how is it going to be beneficial to your customer? Okay, so your strengths will be scored. Showcase your strengths in the introductions, and we're going to look at a way to make them stand out. But introduce that section. Say, let's go back to that transition plan. Talk about, how are you strong in that, the very beginning of that section. Okay. But they don't want you to just say that. They want you, much like we talk about in the capability statement creation, you need to show them what you've done. How can you put metrics or benefits or proof behind that? Make it quantifiable. And you build this, using the customer objective, feature, the benefit, accentuates the strengths. Okay. And can I go through the page and can I find all of those strengths very quickly? So let's look at an example. The customer says they want to reduce the ability of predators to penetrate the network, their computer network, by 10%. Okay, so I'm an offerer. I'm going to say, here's how I do that. So, I use behavior AI-based research. I use analytics. We have a dashboard that we will see the threats across, your platforms. And how is this beneficial, relevant to what you're asking me for, penetrating the network by 10%? Okay, I'm going to tell them, analytics dashboard identifies and manages predatory behavior, customizable alerting, etc. Okay, what's the evidence? You told me, I told you my objective. You told me the features that you have. You told me the benefits of those features. What is the evidence that that really is significant to me? What is the value to me as your customer? So I'm going to say, well, the evidence is that our current customers across the DoD have received 40% fewer cyber breaches for 5 relevant DoD projects across all the platforms. Boom. I have given them the proof. I have told them that I have overachieved. I've exceeded their expectations. Their requirements are 10%. I've told them that I can show through customer engagement that the customers have received 40% fewer cyber breaches to their 10% requirement. So I have significantly lowered their risk. Okay, this is a perfect example of what we're talking about there, showing strengths and exceeding requirements. Okay, now I said we want to be able to scan the page. We want to see those strengths quickly. Here is one way to visualize those in communicating the strengths that you want to highlight. Something that I wasn't familiar with that I learned through doing this is cherry boxes. I've seen those a million times, didn't realize they were called cherry boxes, but you see at the top right here, those cherry boxes, and you can use those in major introductions to the sections to highlight strengths. Tables, we just looked at one. Okay, the second example is looking at a table format for talking about strengths. Shaded areas. You see this little box here where we're pulling out a strength, just a short recap of what we're talking about because it's a strength, and then we've expanded on it in the paragraph. Using graphics, putting a caption, action caption under graphics, and then using icons. And we've all seen, the use of icons to pull the eye in to accentuate something you want the reader to see. And you can certainly use icons in this case as well. Okay, so what we're talking about here is we're really talking about building a proposal in layers. So have a foundation. Again, we're going back to that compliance matrix, okay, that we looked at early on, that simple, what's the requirement? Where did I find that requirement? So if I need to go back to it, I can easily go back to it. And did I incorporate that then in my response? Is it in there? And that gives me a checklist to make sure that it is. And again, to cross-reference that then, if I was told I needed to put it in there, show that evaluator, where did I put it? Okay, so I'm cross-referencing that with my matrix or table of content in my proposal. Okay, so I've been responsive because I know I have through my compliance matrix. I've articulated my purpose. Why did I bid? I have experience with DoD agencies, as I showed in the example, my 5 other projects that I've done. I have good, good outcomes, basic proposal solution. I don't have any significant weaknesses. This is something that we do every day. We're very accomplished in this proposal that we're making for you in the capacity we have and the capabilities that we have. In the middle layer, okay, now we're going to build on the basic must, shalls, and wills in the proposal on the compliance matrix, and we're going to add our features, our strengths, our benefits. Again, going back to this is what you want, this is what we can do, these are our strengths, and this is the outcome. This is how you get value add by picking us for this award. So we're putting it into those sections where we're going to get the most points out of it. Exploiting our competitors' weaknesses. So if we know that there are others that are likely to bid, where are we better than they are? Where are we stronger? But if we're weaker, if our competitors have strengths that we don't have, how do we counter that? How do we get around that? And let the evaluator know that this is where we stand. All benefits focused on the mission and evaluation factors, again, in that evaluation matrix, and the outcome. We make a compelling proposal. We've got those features. We've got our strengths, well documented and scored. And so the final layer really is the communication part. It's easy to evaluate. We've used maybe some of those tables, some of those hints in the visuals on communication. We've used those. It's well written. We spell checked it. We made sure everything was spelled correctly. Check your numbers. Make sure your numbers are all correct. Everything adds up. And the hope would be then we've done all these. We've built this in layers, and we've got a high scoring proposal. Okay, so now I just want to give you maybe a little example here of writing those sections. Okay, so we have a section title. So we write a quick summary. What is that section about? If it's a subsection, so maybe what the section title is breaks down into different subsections. Write a simple statement that says that. Write a background paragraph describing your understanding of the customer's requirements. And they want to know that you get their pain points or you get what they want to have you respond to. Okay, so be insightful for that. But that's not enough. They don't want to know just that you understand, but they want to know then how you're going to solve that. What are you going to do? How do you describe to them what your solution is to their problem? Okay, and then what are the benefits? And we talked about that, and have a summary then of this each subtopic as you go through the paragraphs. So put your proposal effort where it matters. Again, we looked at that metric where they were going to be scoring. So, why they want to pick you. Use your executive summaries to show those strengths. Showcase them again. And, don't keep working on an area where you're not going to get a better score. You're not going to focus on that 10. You're going to focus on that 60 as much as possible. Maximize your strengths. Focus on your differentiators or discriminators. And what are your deliverables going to be? Make sure you have those factored in as well. Okay, so you've got this all done. You now are going to have your final documents that are going to be included with the details of your proposal. Okay, and the first one we're going to talk about, and these are related to requests for proposals. Okay, if it's an RFQ requirement, we'll talk about that separately. But in this case, we're going to talk about requests for proposal. We want a cover letter. The cover letter, I think the most important thing to take away here is that they're humans. It's people dealing with people. This is a conversation. This is not intended to be technical. This is human interaction. This is a conversation that you're having with the reviewer or reviewers that are going to be looking at your proposal. Thank them. Highlight your company's interest in working with them. This is an agency, we've met with you. We're very interested in your agency. We would love the opportunity to meet with you. Share your knowledge of the project requirements. Maybe you had a chance to meet with the contracting officers previously. Maybe you met with a small business professional. It got you excited about working with their organization. Where did that interest in working with them come from? More than just you saw it on SAM, and so you decided to respond. Give them a little more. And again, they're people. And so this is your chance to, in a conversation, non-technical, talk about your value proposition. What are your credentials? Why do they want to choose you? Okay. This is really a way to close with a call to action. You've reiterated your capabilities. You said, hey, if you need more information, please contact me at such and such, and thank them for their time and consideration. So this is more like a sales call, sales communication, showing them you've done your homework and you really are excited about working with them. Okay. And I just put this up here. We're all familiar with the business model canvas. And part of that business model canvas, when you looked at your business, was your value proposition. So, just referring back to this to kind of help you maybe put that sentence or two together about what is the value that you bring to that potential customer. Okay. Now, the other document then is the RFP executive summary, and you'll see this referenced many times. Now, the executive summary is going to be a high-level overview of your entire proposal. So you're going to write this at the very end. Last thing you're going to do is write this executive summary because this is summing up your whole proposal. Okay. This is your first chance for them to see your impact and for you to distinguish yourself. This is one page, so you've got to keep it tight. You keep it at a high level, but it should be readable as a standalone document. So say your RFP, your response, is going to be read by multiple reviewers. And some of those evaluators say, I don't have much time. I'm not going to go into detail. I want to know everything on this one-page summary is going to explain to me what's in this document. If I want to read the rest of it or not, I'm going to judge that based on this executive summary. So that's why I say readable as a standalone document. It's capturing the most important elements and it's persuading that reader to keep going, that evaluator to continue reading your proposal. So you're balancing between highlighting what you're offering and demonstrating that you understand what they need. Okay. So you don't want to talk exclusively me, my business, my business, my business, but you also want to talk about what the organization needs and what your bidding is doing to work with them and their goals. Okay. And then, so you want to stay in the running for a given bid. So this is a powerful document to help them go further. But if they were only going to read that first page, that should capture everything in a summary format that's in your proposal. Okay, and this just kind of guides you through how to format that executive summary. So you want that compelling opening. You want to capture their attention. Again, letting them know that you understand the sector that they're in, the problem the organization is facing, and then how is your company going to engage them in a value add. So you're describing the problem in a short paragraph, the pain points, and that you have a deep understanding of the barriers that they face, but then how your solution is going to help them and support their goals. So you offer that solution, giving a brief overview of your understanding of the requirements, your capability in the space that they're in, the team, if you're going to bring in people, if this is a project that you're working on, you need to bring in people. What does that team look like? And again, this is a one-page summary, so you have to be concise in that. But what's the important highlight of that team you're going to employ? And just an overview of how you're going to successfully deliver the project. And then you're going to close. And you're going to close with a paragraph, really just telling them why you're the best. Why should they pick you? So just quickly and concisely restate any benefits that you have, and especially if there are similar projects that you've done, maybe briefly highlight some of the work you've done in the past as well. Okay. Now, if it's a request for quotes, you're not expected to do those other detailed documents, but summarize for the viewer, much the same in the substitute for an executive summary in a scope document, price and discounts. Where's the pricing? Is it in your response template, or did they give you a response template to fill out? Explain to them briefly how you arrived at the price. Confirm back to them they wanted a delivered price. You're giving them a delivered price from point A to point B. The affirmation, you're in agreement with the terms and conditions. Your reps and certs are up to date. You agree with the terms, affirming the solicitation, and all the amendments are signed and included in the response. Again, if they did an amendment with the Q&A, you have to acknowledge that and don't do anything more than what they ask. Okay, so this just kind of restates in a compliance matrix. So we saw that in the beginning where it was blank, and now we've got this filled out, and this is how we're going. We found that objective. What was it? What was the standard? Where did we put it? Okay, and so we're finalizing that compliance matrix to make sure we satisfied all the requirements, all the shalls, the wills, the must. We've included all of those within the proposal, and we're guiding the person that's reading it to show them that we did. Okay, we're making it easy for the evaluators to look at our proposal. Okay, and just to reiterate compliance and responsiveness, the completion of the solicitation, very important that you've done all that, you've filled out all the documents. Here are some of the standard forms. We looked at the standard form 1449 at the very beginning just to make sure that we were compliant with the requirements. If it was restricted, we fall under whatever restrictions there are. That checklist that we find in section L for the offers, if they ask you for a quality plan, is it a part that you're making? Do you have the quality plan included? That should have been on your compliance matrix, but that was required. If they ask you for a capability statement, you've sent a capability statement and the report from SAM. So this just talks about federal acquisition regulation, establishes a general rule of how long you have to do all of this, to put that response together. And according to the federal regulation, they shall allow you at least a 30-day response time for receipt of bids and proposals from the date they issue the solicitation, with exceptions. And so if you don't get 30 days, the contract resulting from the solicitation will be more than $25,000, but it falls below the simplified acquisition threshold, which is $250,000 in those cases. And then the contract resulting from the solicitation will be more than 25 for commercial goods and services. In those cases, the government just merely establishes a solicitation response time, will afford potential offers a reasonable opportunity to respond. Reasonable as judged by the agency, and that's why it's so important to build relationships with the agencies that you're targeting, because if you have been in previous contact or tracking forecasts and upcoming opportunities, and it's coming, you're ahead of the game with your response. You've already started the preparations for that. And you can do it in what sometimes is a 2-week window versus a 30-day window. But because you've been building that relationship. You already are in process of understanding what the requirements are for the solicitation. So just a word to the wise, submit your proposal early. You know, Murphy's Law, something could happen. You can't control the internet. So these are submitted electronically. Closing date is the closing date. Unless they officially extend it in the solicitation. If it says noon, and always look Eastern time, standard Central time, Pacific time, they're going to be specific. And if it says 12 o'clock and you submitted at 12:01, all that work you've done will be for naught because they don't have to accept it. Okay, unless they have officially extended the timing. One suggestion too is to do a proposal template. And that proposal template is to look at the standard things that you would send them. Capability statement, name and address of the company, your NACE codes, those things that are submitted every time. You could just build a template of those so you don't have to recreate the wheel. The other thing you can do is they're going to ask you to confirm the reps and certs. So the representations and certifications, the federal acquisition and the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement are attested to in SAM. So if you go into SAM, and might be a little hard to read, but this is a snapshot of a page, the reps and certs in a SAM registration where you can download your report. So if you download, if your SAM is current and it is correct, then that could take the place of the reps and certs on the request for proposal by submitting the first page of that report. And again, that's something that can be part of your template because you know you can submit it in that way. And generally in the solicitation, it will say you have to go through and attest to every one of these unless your, SAM is up to date, and then you could submit this. Okay, so let's put some final touches on your proposal. Again, spell check all the sections. Have it organized exactly as the RFP dictates. Review your pricing and your technical solutions one more time. Make sure the technical approach is sound, especially on that proposal where they're going to look at 60 points being for technical. That's where you're going to really focus your review process. Just re-add your numbers. Make sure everything adds up correctly, that the prices are reasonable. It would help too. I know we're all small, and we don't necessarily have a team of people that are doing multiple touches on your proposal. But maybe if you have just somebody that works with you or a colleague that would take a few minutes to independently review after you've looked at it for so long, it's possible to miss something. You'd be amazed at what could be left out. If you've got another set of eyes looking at it, that can be very helpful. It might be a luxury, but it would benefit you in the long run. And again, you've got your table of contents, section, however your proposal is laid out, you want it to match the RFP. So just keep in mind that in a bid, responsiveness is unforgiving. If you make a mistake, you leave something out, you don't follow instructions, your bid will probably be rejected. But in a proposal, responsiveness is still mission critical, but it can be revised to become acceptable if the government decides to enter into negotiations with you. So don't count on that. But again, in a bid, it is what it is, and you won't get a second chance. Okay, so just for a summary, determine if your team, your company, your products, the others that you might partner with, if you have the necessary attributes for submitting that compliant and compliant proposal. Implement any essential business controls and skills that you need. Calculate and factor in the cost of compliance for your business. Make sure you're covering, indirect costs, costs of subcontractors. Make sure that's all there. And keep in mind too, the Department of Defense has controlled unclassified information that is disclosed in a request for a proposal, request for quote, and it's going to require cybersecurity compliance. And so in the case of cybersecurity maturity model certification for DoD contractors, that's going to have to be factored in. And right now, level 1 is self-certification. Level 2, there's a pretty good size expense to that. But at some point, certain contracts are going to require that CMMC certification. Right now, it's a differentiator. So if you've gone to that level, if you have found those auditors and gone through a level 2, huge differentiator. But know in the future that you'll have to be able to show that CMMC level 1 compliance to be eligible for those contracts. Identify and leverage key resources that you have, outside assistance, subject matter experts, to enhance the quality of your proposal if you need to. Make sure that you are aware you have capacity to finance that. If you're not going to get those payments from the government when you need to pay out, then make sure you can handle that and finance your proposal. Now, with that being said, I'm going to ask Jordan if we have any questions, so I will stop there.
Hi, Kelly. We actually do have 2 questions submitted so far. The first one says, should we put headers or logos on each page?
I probably would not. I would certainly use headers, section titles in particular. You have to watch your page count, because your page count, if you start taking up too much space with any logos, then I would not. Now, if you want to make sure that in case the pages would get separated, that they understand it's where it's coming from, that's fine. To have some consistency in the proposal number and your agency, your business, but I would avoid logos because I think that's going to take up too much space.
The next one says, should we put any numbers/cost breakdown in RFP 1-page summary?
I would generalize it for the value, but I wouldn't have that specific information in the 1 page. And there's probably other strengths you could highlight, but I would not get into, I would let the proposal speak for itself. You want to draw them in to read that information, but I think you could better utilize that 1 page for not that level of detail of actual pricing.
And then we did get another one. It says, question about CMMS compliance. Does it also apply to trucking business model, or is it only for IT related entities?
Well, it is more than IT. So I'm assuming that CMMC is the cybersecurity maturity model certification. It's going to depend on what type of data they're going to provide to you. Now, trucking, you may not be required to have CMMC. It depends on the agency. If they want to just blanketly say, you do business with us, we need to make sure that any data is secure. General cyber hygiene is good for any business. And many times at level 1, which could be where you would be in that type of an engagement, it's understanding that you've got those protections for your business. In addition to, it's just pretty straightforward what is required at level 1. So if you're going to do DoD contracting, I would say, work with your Apex Accelerator. It is self-certification, so it certainly is something you can do on your own. It's going to be better for business in the long run, and you could accomplish that maybe with some outside assistance, maybe bringing in a technical person, but sit down and look at it and see if it's realistic. If it's not realistic to do that self-certification, then maybe those are not the right contracts for you to engage in.
We are caught up on questions, but I am going to just reshare because we had a couple people jump on after I had said this in the beginning. You will receive a follow-up email later this afternoon with a link to the recording and a copy of the presentation. I know this is a lot of information for the hour we have today, so if you'd like to meet with Kelly one-on-one to discuss any of this or dive deeper into it, you can register as a client at no cost, and that link will be included in the follow-up email as well.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate that. And again, follow us on LinkedIn and find out the other sessions that we'll be hosting. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. And with that, we'll sign off. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.